Nolan's The Odyssey opens not with cosmic worlds, but with a grounded, harsh vision of the ancient Mediterranean turned into a dark, semi-realistic wartime landscape. The Trojan War has just ended after 10 brutal years, and King Odysseus of Ithaca stands among the smoldering ruins of Troy, exhausted, hollow, and burdened by the choices that helped win the war, including the strategy of the Trojan horse. Nolan frames Odysseus as a brilliant tactician haunted by the moral cost of victory, emphasizing psychological realism over mythology. As the Greek armies prepare to return home, a storm brews unnaturally fast, hinting that forces beyond human understanding will shape Odysseus' journey long before he realizes he is no longer just traveling through the world, but through the consequences of his own mind and actions. Odysseus sets sail with his loyal crew, but the sea is presented as a character of its own, unpredictable, violent, and almost conscious. Nolan grounds the supernatural into phenomena driven by misunderstood ancient science, strange magnetic storms, gravitational anomalies, and mysterious coastal civilizations. The first disaster strikes when Odysseus' fleet encounters an island covered in poisonous flowers whose scents alter memory and judgment, Nolan-esque reinterpretation of the Lotus Eaters. The crew becomes lethargic and delusional, falling into visions of home that feel painfully real. Odysseus must drag them back to the ships, symbolizing his first test, resisting emotional illusions that are easier than reality. Next, the ships enter the territory of the Cyclops, reimagined not as a giant monster, but a brutal, towering minor warrior living inside an ancient volcanic fortress. He wears a single mechanical lens over one eye, a primitive optical device that gives him superhuman sight. Nolan turns the myth into a tense survival sequence. Trapped inside the cavern with his men, Odysseus uses wit rather than brute strength, crafting a clever deception involving reflective shields and the miner's own optical device. The escape is brutal and leaves the Cyclops blinded, swearing vengeance. This becomes the first moment where Odysseus' tactical brilliance directly creates future danger. The vengeful Cyclops calls upon his patron, Poseidon, and in Nolan's interpretation, Poseidon is not a literal god, but a powerful maritime warlord who controls vast fleets and coastal territories. The film presents him as the embodiment of the sea's wrath, a force Odysseus cannot reason with. Storms and whirlpools begin targeting Odysseus specifically, as if nature itself has become hostile. Nolan creates ambiguity. Are these divine punishments, or the consequence of angering a ruthless warlord with near-mythic influence? The line between myth and grounded realism blurs. Odysseus next encounters the sorceress Circe, but Nolan reframes her as a brilliant scientist shaman living on an isolated island. Her magic is advanced herbal chemistry and psychological manipulation. She drugs Odysseus' men, turning their minds feral and animalistic, symbolizing the myth of turning men into swine. Odysseus resists her influence thanks to an herb agent given by a mysterious traveler named Hermes, a fugitive messenger who understands Circe's methods. Odysseus negotiates with Circe rather than defeating her, and she becomes an uneasy ally, warning him that if he wishes to return home, he must face not only physical trials but the ghosts of his past. Circe directs Odysseus to descend into the underworld, but instead of a literal realm of the dead, Nolan presents it as a massive subterranean labyrinth built by an extinct civilization. The air is thin, the passageways dangerous, and hallucinations caused by toxic gases make the environment feel supernatural. Here, Odysseus confronts visions of fallen comrades, broken promises, and an eerie projection of his wife Penelope waiting alone in Ithaca. In this sequence, Nolan explores guilt and fear, suggesting that the most powerful enemies are the ones within. Emerging from the underworld, Odysseus sails toward the path controlled by the Sirens. Instead of mythical half-women creatures, Nolan turns them into a group of deadly signalers who use hypnotic songs to lure ships onto razor-sharp rock formations. They manipulate acoustics and wind currents to make their voices irresistible. Odysseus orders his crew to seal their ears with wax while he himself is tied to the mast, determined to hear the truth in the siren's song. This becomes one of the film's most intense sequences, a psychological assault where the sirens whisper Odysseus' deepest fears and desires, tempting him to abandon his journey. Following the Sirens, the fleet must pass through the Strait of Scylla and Charybdis, reimagined as a narrow canyon where one side is controlled by a monstrous militarized pirate queen Scylla, and the other a colossal whirlpool created by unstable underwater volcanic vents, Charybdis. Nolan creates a brutal choice. Avoid the certain destruction of the whirlpool by sacrificing a portion of his men to Scylla. Odysseus makes the painful tactical decision, highlighting the cost of leadership. The resulting ambush becomes one of the film's most tragic moments. Shipwrecked and alone, Odysseus washes ashore on the island of Calypso, reinterpreted as a brilliant but isolated woman living in an untouched paradise. She nurses him back to health, offering him a peaceful life free from war, responsibility, and suffering. Nolan frames this chapter as the emotional heart of the film, the temptation of stillness. Odysseus nearly gives in, exhausted from the endless trials, but ultimately realizes that peace without purpose is another form of imprisonment. He leaves strengthened by the knowledge that he must choose his fate, not escape it. Odysseus finally returns to Ithaca in disguise, discovering his home overtaken by corrupt nobles competing to marry Penelope. Nolan frames the climax as a quiet but explosive confrontation driven by strategy, not spectacle. Odysseus reveals himself through the challenge of the bow, then unleashes a swift, controlled attack that reclaims his kingdom. The final scene shows him reunited with Penelope, not as a triumphant hero, but as a scarred man who endured unimaginable trials to return. Nolan closes on a reflective note. The greatest journey was not across islands or seas, but across the depths of Odysseus' own humanity.